Hello, we're going to be talking about the future of cloud computing, and I'm with a range of industry luminaries to find out more. So first, what will the cloud look like in 10 years' time?
Well, in 10 years' time, the amount of data that's consumed by everybody on the planet will be 1,000 times bigger than it is today. And it's already very difficult to comprehend that data usage, data volume, and data interaction. The cloud today is a series of independent proprietary implementations. In 10 years' time, it'll be much more uniform. It'll be based on open systems. We'll have a foundation across all of the providers of cloud services that will be interactive, and it will respond more in a way of crowdsourcing. It will be a living, evolutionary thing. Today it's very proprietary, so it'll be much more open, much more shared. The only thing that might alter that vision would be more like geopolitical considerations. So you may see that instead of having global clouds, you may have regional clouds governed by political considerations. That's the only negative I see on the horizon that would change that pattern. But within those regions, it will definitely be open sourced, open and responsive to developers, and be very dynamic provision of data services and information technology.
We're very focused on the enterprise, so the Global 2000 and even the small and medium-sized businesses. I think cloud will revolutionize all those businesses. All those businesses in terms of technology will use cloud at the core of how they go to market. So we'll be seeing a lot more Ubers, we'll seeing a lot more Airbnbs, and I'm quite excited to see that future.
Looking 10 years into the future in Silicon Valley is pretty hard. Let me make a couple of guesses. So first thing, I think we'll see a lot of uptake in the cloud, specifically from the small and medium-sized enterprises. If you're a small business in the future, you will probably not have a server on premise anymore. You will move all of this up into the cloud. It's more complicated for the large enterprises. The very large guys, the hyperscale guys, for them running data centers is a core competency, so they'll continue to do this by themselves. And my expectation is that in a 10-year time frame, the same will be true for many of the large enterprises as well.
So what are the biggest challenges that you see on the road towards the future of cloud computing?
So the main thing is a lack of trust. So it's about everybody who wants to move to use more cloud services, put their data out into the cloud, use their networks out into the cloud, they're worried about loss of control. So if you think about boards of directors of companies, worried about the security of data, worried about business continuity, as soon as you push a major part of these processes out to cloud providers, you're putting part of your destiny out in somebody else's hands. So what we need to do is assure people that the technologies are working, that they are scalable, that they give you security, and that you have ownership of the data, and you can get agreements on the type of level of service you'll get from the cloud providers. So that's where we come in. We enable people to run benchmark performance tests on the processes and network functional virtualization that's being done across the globe at the moment. And we're working with the leading developers and service providers on enabling those technologies.
I think the main challenge is really the fact that you can't put business applications in the cloud today. The public internet just doesn't work for doing that. So what's done right now is that cloud service providers work with enterprises and network service providers to provide managed services, because the internet, the public internet today doesn't really provide the kind of performance and the kind of security you need for your critical business application and your intellectual property and data actually being in the cloud. So to overcome that, the network service providers actually provide managed services. The challenge is, depending on the cloud service that is being connected to, it's always a proprietary interface, and it always requires a level of manual integration. So what that means is it takes a long time to provision that network connectivity for that managed service for that end-to-end accessibility to that critical business application in the cloud. And then, by the way, you just happen to be locked into that particular cloud service provider because you're using their proprietary services. So if any kind of innovation comes along, or if any kind of pricing benefit comes along, you're kind of stuck, which is obviously going to limit the ability of your company or your enterprise to innovate and also compete.
So if you look at the type of applications that at least enterprise customers are moving up to the cloud today, these tend to be fairly simple applications. They don't have a lot of sensitive data associated with them. They don't have complex compliance requirements, for example. So I think if I look at roadblocks, I think actually the roadblock number one is probably going to be data. Right? In a cloud world, you move the application to the data and not the other way around. For an enterprise, this means as your data is currently in your local data center, the key question for you will not be when are you ready to move your applications into the cloud. The key question will be when are you ready to move your data, right? And this will depend on privacy, on compliance, on the regulations that you're exposed to. I think a second challenge may be that depending on which cloud you go to, you actually need a change in how your teams operate, right? You have to, the classical silos that you're used to will no longer function. And you may even need to train your developers to write your applications in a different way.
So how are we going to overcome those hurdles on that wonderful shining path to cloud computing?
Well, it's a very dynamic situation at the moment. Everybody's adapting to new business processes and they're looking at new ways of innovating. You're seeing that's coming through with all the startups that we see around, but also within companies, we're all pushing our teams into developing technologies in a different way. So we're becoming much more agile. Everything's moving into the live network. So you talk about development, DevOps, that's really pushing that dynamism forward. And the more we interact and the more we have the conversations like this meeting, where we share our ideas and we set the way forward, then those are steps towards building that new future.
The core mission for OpenCloud Connect is really to provide that end-to-end connectivity and that end-to-end commercial service to enable the business cloud service. So in order for OpenCloud Connect to effectively do that, we need members that represent all the different constituents that you would see in any cloud ecosystem. That includes enterprises, that includes cloud service providers, that includes data center providers, network service providers, the network equipment providers, and of course all the different testers that are required to validate that environment. And first off, we have achieved, I think, largely that goal of having a diverse member base, but we do need some more cloud service providers and we need some enterprises. So the next step really that we're focused on is building out a reference architecture, which is essentially a common language, common terminology that defines the interfaces that delineate all these different constituents in the cloud. And we've just published that, so we're very excited about that. It took us quite a lot of work to get everybody aligned around that common language, but now we have a common language that we can all work against and work towards. So the next step for us is really starting to validate different use cases for critical business applications in the cloud. What's required to actually deploy that from an infrastructure as a service perspective, from a network as a service perspective, so that enterprise, that end user can really get what they need when they need from their software as a service. And we've actually, the members have actually come together and built as sort of core to the premise of the OpenCloud Connect, a lab that's interconnected globally and represents all these different constituents and represents the reference architecture that we have in place today. And now we're iterating through many different or several different use cases to validate that we can do this in a standard way. Right now, we're not doing it in a standard way, but we're finding out what's required to actually enable the service, to get that performance, to get that security for the end user, and then we're figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Why does it take us too long? Or what kind of interfaces have particular issues, and what kind of services are going to be most relevant? So by working through that as a testing first type approach or methodology, we can then inform the standards process and we can determine the right services to focus on developing within the technical committee.
So I think there's a couple of things, right? Right now, one of the key roadblocks is networking, right? If you think about many of the security mechanisms or the control points that safeguard your data in your on-premise data center are not available in the cloud yet, right? If you're trying to take a PCI-compliant application that has credit card data and move into the cloud, that's still very, very difficult today because many of the things you're using on-premise you can't use in the cloud yet. So I think the first thing for us is we need to be able to provide the same security mechanisms in the cloud that we currently provide on premise, right? I think the second thing is we will need to find ways how you can have a gradual migration. And again, the problem is not the programs, it's the data, right? How you can take certain subsets of data, move them into the cloud, and then have software start utilizing this data there. You know, I think there's sort of the building today, you know, if you have a brand new startup, you know, and a couple of hipsters in a garage in San Francisco, they're building the new mobile social thing. For them, it's very easy to build this purely on a public cloud, right? For classic enterprise, it's a completely different ballgame because they have a lot more legacy to deal with. Facilitating this migration path, I think that will be the main challenge that we have to solve.
So, the future of cloud is bright. Perhaps the only question remaining is which of the many roads we take to get there.